There's two news items about energy that are slightly related to each other and antagonistic in a way, because on the one hand California reveals that it doesn't want to have the problems of feed-in tariffs like Germany, which are not problematic at all, which are actually very, very effective. But because to avoid those problems, it will implement a bidding process. And the bidding process works that if you want to have a PV panel project, then you have to go to your utility and offer your project, and the utility will choose the cheapest, most efficient one, let's say the most megawatts for the dollars to build. And then of course they can distribute the electricity. This is typically American approach, because America is all about maintaining the oligarchy, maintaining the power structure that the power companies have at the moment. And in order to do that, you have to distribute power centrally. So you have to generate it centrally and distribute it. And then of course the electricity flow and the money flows can continue exactly the same as they are right now. The irony is of course that if this goes on and all let's say fossil fuel power is replaced by renewable, you'll see that 100 years from now everybody is still paying their electricity bill, while if they would install solar panels on their own roof, they wouldn't be paying after about 8 years. They would be making money from the start. There's a good thing about it, and that's that you get more megawatts for the money. But there's the bad aspect, of course, of this Californian approach is that it doesn't really generate a lot of jobs. It wastes a lot of electricity because it has to be transported, which means that there's losses, and it doesn't create a free, safe economy. And that's basically where it links to another news item, which is the power outage in San Diego. 2 500 kilovolt lines were switched off, and the whole city is without power. 2 million, some other news reports say 5 million people without electricity. It is an open invitation to criminals, and I'm not the first one saying that, because Homeland Security, I believe, had a challenge where they asked for people to describe scenarios where terrorists would cut power lines in order to create chaos. It is very easy, that is quite clear. It is very easy for anybody interested in robbing places that use electricity from the main grid to power their security systems or surveillance systems, to cut a few power lines, create instability, and then profit from it. Because your car runs on diesel or gasoline, you can drive around and be everywhere, but the surveillance is simply not there, and maybe the communication is also failing after a while. 2 power lines for a huge city is a huge vulnerability, and it's completely discrediting any plans to build to extend the grid. That's such a waste of energy, literally, because it's much more efficient in terms of money per watt than to create renewable sources where you need them, as close as possible to the productive centers, to agricultural centers, to manufacturing centers. And so I think that there should be more power outages. It is, I think, also a function of how criminal elements will seize opportunities that are presented, and there's lots of opportunities. Of course, we know about stealing copper and all that stuff, but with a little organization, you can do a lot more damage if let's say the legal environment is weakened, like the police force is preoccupied with drugs, drug gangs, and the legal system is corrupted, and people basically don't have time. There's lots of poor people that you can motivate to do all kinds of crap. It's just a dangerous environment, and that's all created because of the carbon credit system that is reducing carbon supply to the US. It has basically managed through the banking system to reduce the carbon fuel supply by 30%, which is enormous. And maybe it's planning to do it in other ways, for instance by egging on people disturbing power transmission through the US, so that coal-fired power plants will power down once the power transmission lines are broken, and they don't have to burn the coal, so they don't have to import the coal. It's turning into a prison, the US. It's turning into a catch 322 million or something like that, because if you try to go through the legal system and the political system, you notice that it's a complete distraction. It's just to divide you enough just to be incapacitated, but not riot. It's just you're being kept on the edge. So it's useless. The Beckmans and the Perrys and the Ron Pauls are even useless. It's not gonna matter anyway what you do with them, because they're all inundated in a whole ocean of lobbyists that are not regulated. And then you have the other alternative is to riot or to protest, but you can be deemed a terrorist and put into Guantanamo, or you can simply, there's any other excuse that you can make to put you into jail. Recently a kid was jailed for 8 years for having an inflatable doll on the toilet of his school, as a prank, as a joke. Went to jail for 8 years. That's how well organized the legal system is. So you have no escape, and the penitentiary institutions are of course making huge profits. If you decide to become a criminal, you could almost be a paid criminal, a hired criminal. So you just ring the bell and say, well, if you pay me 10%, then I'll be in your penitentiary and stay there. And then they'll say, hey, that's bribery. We'll just arrest you and put you inside anyway. And then you protest and say, oh, that's verbal violence. Now you put you inside. Now you're a terrorist. You try to enter this facility. I'm not sure what. They can make up anything now. So it's a catch-22. You cannot be good. You cannot be evil. What can you do? I think you should get out. Basically, it's just scary. And the bad thing, of course, is that everywhere where the carbon credit system is ruling, you have this trend, because it's the trend that's necessary in order to create, let's say, the minimum amount of people that will profit from the oil wealth that is remaining, and the maximum amount of people that will not be helped or served. So you don't have to spend your oil or coal or gas on them. You can only have an elite that is rich. Just like when you had huge landowners, then there's only 1 or 2 landowners that can be in the big house, because they're the landowners, and the rest has to work and make sure that stuff is produced for their own nutrition, but also to sell and all that stuff. It's it's trending towards that, and it's all because of the non-adaptation of renewables. So I think that should be if you want to revolt, you can do several things. Of course, you can buy gold and silver, which will endanger the banks, because the serious rich people also look at those items, and they'll see that they're getting more scarce and scarce, and they're not there maybe, and then they pull out, and the whole, let's say, the whole support structure, the network, the social network of the banking system will deteriorate and collapse, and the trust will not be there. And that's exactly what you want, because it's built on a mandatory trust, legal fiat system, and then afterwards it's coerced trust. Another thing that is interesting to note about this whole San Diego outage is that you'll get, I think, more incidences of simple criminality, which might be branded terrorism, but simple criminality because of the opportunity. And the more the criminals take over and have power, the more it will be in their type of sphere. So I think that what you might see is more boxing champions, cage fights champions being whacked, taken out, hockey teams, football teams, whatever basically strokes the ego and the ambitions of more let's say mafia type criminals. In order to punish each other, these type of targets will be attacked in order to weaken each other, in order to irk and, and frustrate. And of course, it's completely possible to have marauding gangs if you don't already have them, and because it's very easy to organize, of course. I don't really wish for this, but I completely. There's 2 positive aspects. One is it makes people think about renewables and how they can be applied locally, which is a perfect trend, because they will be creating. If you pull up a windmill in a community of 500 people, you really have a huge, like a 5 megawatt windmill or something like that. You really have something to sell. It's worth everything you have to do that, I think. Because you will be able to do a lot. You'll be able to power electrical vehicles, to make fuels, to make you can bake, you can air condition, you can do all kinds of stuff, build. There's no limit if you just have the power source and you own it. And I think that's a good trend that comes out of this more or less chaotic process, which is caused by the carbon credit system. But in the end, there needs to be a new base of authority, a new base of exerting and executing authority, which has to start with the people, I think, and which is not cute. Like all these civilian initiatives are cute. They're like, oh, let's do good for the planet and let's love the planet and animals. That's because people are basically doused in a whole, let's say, gravy of media crap that makes them think that they're a good person when they save animals and all this stuff. And that's basically enough, that you then are a social person and you should be accepted. The social morality is pretty much is very limited if somebody else controls what is social and what's not. You know, if you allow somebody else that you don't know, that's on a television set or internet set, to define for you what is socially acceptable, then you're a complete cow, complete follower. You shouldn't do that. And the easiest way to gauge whether something is socially acceptable or not is just look at the rule of law and make sure that it is applied locally and that it's never diverted from it, and make sure that people that you know understand it. But I don't know if this is a possibility or something that you find let's say realistic. I do think that as I'm now experiencing in where I come from, you know the people a little bit more, and that's really helpful. Things become much easier, and you also have a sense of community, which is good to have. Simply, it's just something that is where you know what you did for each other. For instance, one of these guys told that he had a neighbor that when he had young kids, the neighbor would look out for the kids when they were playing in the garden, so they didn't run into any trouble. And that's something that builds a bond because you're protecting each other. And I think that's a good start. Hopefully, and that's not something you do with guns. And hopefully, the people that do have the guns that should protect you are not corrupt and asking for a hell of a lot of money and turn on you and become your extortionist. Because that's just that's the point where you have to decide that you're going to put up a fight yourself. But whatever happens to the power grid in the US, I think it's a complete waste of money to invest in it. Wherever it's spanning large distances, it's a huge vulnerability, and hopefully it can be made. Let's say the perception that it's a vulnerability can be created with small incidents, like relatively small incidents like this one in San Diego. Of course, it costs billions of all the meat that was refrigerated that is now wasted. And all the other stuff that needed cooling that cannot be cooled, and maybe people in medical conditions have run into trouble, and maybe all kinds of other trouble can have happened because the traffic lights probably didn't work. So you don't want that, but if it makes people aware of the fact that they should localize their energy production, and it's a sunny state, so it's completely possible, then that's a positive outcome. Anyway, thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you again.